11 September 1297. The Battle of Stirling Bridge, River Forth, Scotland. English cavalry thunders toward a narrow wooden crossing, their armour glinting through morning mist. On the far bank, William Wallace watches in silence as thousands of enemy soldiers funnel onto the bridge, 2 men abreast, trapped between deep water and marshland. The Scots are outnumbered 3-1. But Wallace isn't retreating. He's waiting. In minutes, he'll trigger the most devastating ambush in medieval warfare. A slaughter so complete, it will be whispered about in terror for centuries. This is the moment Scotland stopped running. The year is 1296, and Scotland is dying, not on a battlefield, not in some grand last stand, slowly, quietly. Under the iron fist of King Edward I of England, a man they will come to call Longshanks, and later, far worse. He has done what no conqueror before him managed. He has broken Scotland's back without shattering her bones. Castles seized, nobles bent to the knee, the Stone of Scone, the ancient coronation stone of Scottish kings, ripped from its sacred home and hauled south to Westminster like a trophy. A message written in stone. You have no king, you have no nation, you are mine. English garrisons squat in every major town. Sheriffs enforce brutal taxation. Common Scots are hanged for resisting, their bodies left to rot as warnings. The great lords, the ones who should lead, bicker over who might beg Edward for favour, who might salvage their estates by collaboration. Some fight, most kneel. Scotland, it seems, has no spine left. But rage does not need permission from nobles. Somewhere in the forests of Lanark, a man named William Wallace becomes a killer, not a knight, not a lord. A commoner, a younger son with no inheritance, no title, nothing to lose. The stories will blur. Was it a murdered father, a slain lover, a brother hanged? The truth is less important than what follows. Wallace kills an English sheriff, then another. He gathers men, dispossessed farmers, outlaws, townsmen with nowhere left to run. They strike garrisons, burn supply trains, vanish into the woods like smoke. The English call him a brigand. The Scots call him something else. Further north, in Moray and Aberdeen, another rebellion smoulders. Andrew Moray, a young nobleman whose father rots in an English prison, raises the northern clans. Unlike Wallace, Moray has legitimacy, training, strategy. He besieges castles, he takes them. One by one, the English grip on the north loosens. 2 uprisings, 2 leaders, 1 land burning. By late summer of 1297, the rebellions converge. Wallace's guerrilla band and Moray's disciplined northern forces unite near Stirling, roughly 1,800 Scots. Farmers with spears, townsmen with axes, a few knights who chose honour over survival. Against them, the entire military, weight of English-occupied Scotland. King Edward is in Flanders, waging war abroad. But his lieutenants in Scotland are experienced, well-armed and furious. John de Warenne, Earl of Surrey, an ageing commander who has won battles from Wales to the Holy Land. Hugh de Cressingham, the royal treasurer, a fat, cruel bureaucrat who sees rebellion as an insult to his ledger. They gather an army, 3,000 heavy cavalry, 10,000 infantry, Welsh longbowmen, hardened professionals. The message is clear. This ends now. The English march north towards Stirling, confident, contemptuous. Wallace and Moray are outnumbered 5-1. Any sane commander would retreat, scatter, survive to fight another day. But Wallace does not retreat. He chooses Stirling, and not to fight the English, to bury them. William Wallace stands on rising ground north of the River Forth, eyes fixed on the narrow wooden bridge below. Beside him, Andrew Moray, calmer, steadier, a soldier where Wallace is a storm. Around them, 1,800 men who should not be here. Most have never held a spear in formation. Most have never seen a cavalry charge. Most will be dead by winter if this fails. But Wallace is not looking at his men. He is looking at the bridge. Stirling Bridge is not grand. Rough timber posts, wooden planks worn smooth by decades of traffic, wide enough for 2 horses, maybe 3 if they squeeze. It spans the River Forth at a place where the water runs deep and fast, cutting through boggy lowland that sucks at boots and hooves alike. North of the bridge, the ground rises, firm, defensible. South of the bridge, the English camp, sprawling and arrogant. The Scots have no castles to hide behind, no walls, no supply lines. What they have is this: the English must cross that bridge to reach them, and the bridge is a killing floor. Moray sees it, Wallace sees it. The English do not. In the English camp, Hugh de Cressingham paces, furious. Supplies are expensive. Delays are expensive. These ragged Scots squatting on a hill are an insult. He wants this over. John de Warenne, older and warier, hesitates. A Scottish noble, one who has bent the knee to Edward, suggests they use a ford 2 miles upriver, wide enough to cross in force, safe. Cressingham overrules him. "We did not come here to avoid battle," he snarls. "We came to crush rebels. The bridge is faster." Warenne, tired and sick, relents. The order is given: cross at dawn. That night Wallace walks among his men. Most cannot sleep. They sharpen spears, mutter prayers, stare at the river glinting in moonlight. Some ask if they will survive. Wallace does not lie to them. "Stay in formation," he says quietly. "Hold the line. When I give the word, not before, you run at them like your lives depend on it." Because they do. Moray moves through the northern men, steadying nerves, checking weapons. He is methodical where Wallace is fire. Together, they are something the English do not expect. Prepared. As dawn breaks, mist coils over the Forth. The air smells of wet earth and iron. Across the river, English banners stir. Drums begin to beat. The first horsemen step onto the bridge, 2 abreast. Hooves on wood, the creak of leather and mail. Wallace watches and waits. The bridge is a throat, and the English are choking on their own confidence. Stirling Bridge was never built for war. It was built for merchants, for cattle, for quiet crossings on market days. 12 feet wide, 500 feet long. Wooden planks nailed to oak pilings driven deep into the riverbed. It sways slightly under weight. It groans when cavalry crosses. And this morning, it is swallowing an army. From the southern bank, the English column stretches back for miles. 3,000 cavalry, 10,000 infantry, baggage trains, engineers, archers, the largest force Scotland has seen in a generation. But all that power means nothing if it cannot deploy. And to deploy, it must cross. 2 horses at a time. The River Forth loops around the Abbey Craig, the high ground where Wallace waits, like a noose tightening. To the east and west, deep, boggy marshland. Soft ground that will trap a charging horse, suck a man down to his knees. The only crossing for miles is the bridge. The only escape from the north bank is the bridge. The English see none of this as a problem. From the southern camp, Hugh de Cressingham watches the vanguard cross with satisfaction. Armoured knights, resplendent in mail and heraldry, their war horses stepping carefully over the timbers. Behind them, infantry, professional soldiers, men who have fought in Wales, in France, in the savage border wars. They march in good order, spears upright, shields ready. On the far bank, they begin to form up. Tight ranks, cavalry spreading into a line, waiting for enough men to cross so they can advance in force. Wallace watches from the hill. He does not move. Beside him, a young Scot grips his spear so hard his knuckles are white. "When?" he whispers. "Not yet," Wallace murmurs. More English cross, 2 by 2, hooves, boots, the creak of wood under iron weight. 50 men on the north bank, then 100, then 200. The bridge sways, the river churns beneath it. John de Warenne, watching from the rear, feels a prickle of unease. His veteran's instinct whispers, "This is wrong. This is too slow. We are vulnerable." But Cressingham waves him off. "Look at them," he says, gesturing at the Scots on the distant hill. "Rabble. Farmers. They will break the moment we charge." Warren says nothing. 300 English on the north bank now. 400. The crossing continues, methodical, unstoppable. The bridge trembles but holds. Wallace tilts his head slightly, listening. Not to the English, to the bridge. He knows wood. He knows weight. He knows how much a structure can bear before it screams. And he knows, to the minute, how long it will take for enough English soldiers to cross. Just enough to be trapped. Too many to retreat quickly. But not enough to overwhelm his line. Andrew Moray leans close. "If we wait too long..." "We wait," Wallace says, voice like stone. 500 English now. The north bank is crowded. Cavalry jostle for position. Infantry press forward, eager to close with the enemy. The Scots stand motionless on the hill, silent, waiting. And then, as the sun burns through the mist and the bridge groans under the weight of 600 men and horses, Wallace raises his hand. Now. The word falls like a blade. Now. And the hillside explodes. 1,800 Scots erupt from the high ground in a roaring wave of iron and fury. Not a chaotic mob, a schiltron, the ancient Scottish formation. Tight ranks of spearmen, shields overlapped, 12-foot pikes bristling outward like the quills of some monstrous beast. They do not charge blindly. They move as one, downhill, building terrible momentum. The English on the north bank freeze. For a single fatal heartbeat, they do not understand what is happening. There are perhaps 600 of them now. Cavalry in the front, infantry crowding behind, all pressed into the narrow loop of land between the river and the marsh. They came expecting a skirmish, a rout, a slaughter of peasants. What they see instead is a wall of spears bearing down on them at terrifying speed, and behind it, the cold, unforgiving math of the trap. They are boxed in. A knight shouts orders. "Form up! Form up!" But there is no room. Horses wheel and collide. Infantry stumble over one another. The marsh to the east sucks at hooves. The river churns to the west. And from the south, the bridge, their only lifeline, is still clogged with soldiers trying to cross, unaware that the men ahead are about to die. The schiltrons crash into the English vanguard, like an avalanche of steel. Spears punch through mail. Horses scream and rear, throwing riders into the mud. The Scots do not stop. They push forward, step by step, grinding the English line backward toward the water. There is no room for cavalry to charge, no space for archers to loose volleys. It is close, brutal, suffocating. Men die inches apart, stabbed through gaps in armor, crushed under falling horses, trampled by their own comrades. Wallace is everywhere, not commanding from a distance, fighting. His voice cuts through the chaos. "Hold the line. Push them to the river." He moves like a predator, precise and merciless, spear striking again and again. Andrew Moray leads the northern schiltron, cooler, methodical. His men angle left, driving a wedge between the English and the bridge. The movement is surgical, deliberate, and devastating, because now the trap is complete. A group of Scottish axemen sprint past the schiltrons and seize the northern end of the bridge. They plant themselves in a bristling wall of blades and fury. No more English will cross. No reinforcements, no escape. The soldiers already on the north bank realize it all at once. They are going to die here. Panic spreads faster than fire. Knights try to fight their way back to the bridge and meet Scottish axes. Infantry turn to flee and find nowhere to run. Only marsh, only water, only spears. Some throw down weapons and beg for mercy. There is none. This is not a battle. It is an execution. On the southern bank, Hugh de Cressingham watches in disbelief. His carefully organized column has become a screaming, dying tangle. He shouts for more men to cross, to push through, to break the Scots. But the bridge is chaos now. Soldiers try to retreat. Others try to advance. They collide, shove, stumble. The timbers groan under the crush of armoured bodies. And still, the killing continues. The River Forth becomes a graveyard. English soldiers, trapped and desperate, hurl themselves into the water. Some try to swim in full armour and sink like stones. Others claw at the muddy banks, only to be dragged down by the weight of mail and the sucking grip of the marsh. Horses thrash and drown, eyes rolling white with terror. Bodies pile up along the shoreline, tangled with reeds and river weed. The Scottish schiltrons do not relent. They push forward in grinding, relentless waves, compressing the English pocket tighter and tighter. Spears stab, axes fall, men slip on blood-slicked grass and are trampled before they can rise. The sound is ungodly, screaming, the wet crunch of metal through bone, the gurgling choke of drowning men, the desperate whinny of dying horses. A handful of English knights try to rally. Sir Marmaduke Thweng, a grizzled veteran who has fought in a dozen wars, bellows for his men to form a wedge. They cluster around him, shields locked, and drive toward the bridge like a battering ram. Scots hurl themselves at the formation and are cut down, but more come, and more. Thweng's wedge cleaves through, step by bloody step. Men die on both sides, but Thweng is experienced, brutal, unstoppable. He reaches the bridge, fights his way onto the timbers, and slashes through the Scottish blockade. A few knights follow. Most do not. Thweng makes it across. He is one of perhaps a dozen English soldiers who escape the North Bank alive. Behind him, the slaughter intensifies. Hugh de Cressingham, enraged and humiliated, spurs his horse onto the bridge. He will cross. He will turn this disaster around. He will crush these peasants himself. He makes it halfway before a Scottish spearman lunges from the crowd and drags him from his saddle. Cressingham hits the planks hard, gasping, his fat body encased in expensive armour. He tries to rise. A dozen Scots fall on him. Axes rise and fall. The royal treasurer of Scotland dies in the mud and blood of a bridge he dismissed as irrelevant. Later, much later, the Scots will flay strips of skin from his corpse. Some say Wallace keeps a piece, as a belt. Others say it is divided among the army as a grim trophy. The truth is lost to rage and legend. What matters is this: Cressingham is dead, and with him dies English arrogance. On the southern bank, John de Warenne stares across the river in numb horror. His vanguard is gone. His best knights are dead or drowning. The bridge is a killing ground. And the Scots, those ragged, impossible Scots, stand victorious on the far side, spears raised, howling triumph into the morning sky. An officer appears at his side, pale and shaking. "My lord, what are your orders?" Warenne's voice is hollow. "Burn the bridge." "But our men!" "Burn it!" There are still English soldiers on the north bank, dozens, maybe 100, scattered and broken, trying to hide in the marsh or swim the river. The order dooms them. But Warenne has no choice. Engineers rush forward with torches. Flames lick at the old timber. The bridge groans, cracks, and collapses into the river with a roar of splintering wood and spray. The English army, what remains of it, turns south and flees. Silence falls over the battlefield like ash. The Scots stand among the bodies, chests heaving, hands slick with blood. Some lean on their spears, too exhausted to cheer. Others stare at the carnage in disbelief, as if waking from a nightmare only to find it real. The north bank of the River Forth is a wasteland. Hundreds of English dead sprawl across the muddy ground. Knights in shattered armour, infantrymen with their guts spilled into the grass, archers who never loosed a single arrow. Horses lie broken-legged and dying. The river itself is clogged with corpses, turning the water dark and slow. Andrew Moray walks among the fallen, checking the Scottish casualties. They are light. shockingly light. Perhaps 100 dead, twice that wounded. Against an English force 5 times their size, it is a miracle. But Moray does not smile. He has seen what victory costs. He has seen men he grew up with lying still in the mud. He has seen boys, too young to grow beards, clutching wounds that will kill them by nightfall. Wallace stands at the riverbank, watching the remains of the English army disappear southward. His face is unreadable. Blood drips from his spear. Around him, Scots begin to loot the dead, pulling rings from fingers, stripping armour, gathering weapons. It is ugly, necessary. This is not a war of honour. It is a war of survival. A young soldier approaches Wallace, wide-eyed and trembling. "We won," he says, as if trying to convince himself. "We won." Wallace does not turn. "We won a battle," he says quietly. "Not the war." But the soldiers do not hear him. The reality is sinking in now, spreading through the ranks like wildfire. They, farmers, outlaws, commoners, have destroyed the finest army England could send. They have killed a royal treasurer. They have shattered the myth of English invincibility. The cheering begins slowly, then louder, then deafening. Men embrace, weep, raise bloodied weapons to the sky. They chant Wallace's name, Moray's name, Scotland's name. On the southern bank, the English do not stop running until they reach the safety of Berwick, 40 miles away. John de Warenne, humiliated and broken, will resign his command. The disaster at Stirling Bridge will haunt English commanders for decades. In Westminster, when word reaches King Edward, he will fly into a rage so violent his courtiers fear for their lives. But here now, in this blood-soaked loop of the River Forth, Scotland has done the impossible. The bridge is gone. The English are gone. And William Wallace, outlaw, commoner, rebel, has become something far more dangerous. A legend. Act 3. The Shadow of the Bridge. The counting begins at dawn. Scottish soldiers move through the killing ground, turning over bodies, checking faces, searching for their own among the dead. The work is grim and necessary. Every corpse must be accounted for. Every fallen Scot must be named, honoured, carried home if possible. The English dead number in the thousands. Exact figures will never be known. Bodies were swept downriver, dragged into the marsh, buried in mass graves, or left to rot. But the best estimates suggest between 2,000 and 3,000 English soldiers died at Stirling Bridge. Knights, professional infantry, archers who never had the chance to draw their bows. Men who marched north confident and arrogant, certain they were crushing rabble. They died in minutes. The Scottish losses are staggering in their absence. Roughly 100 dead, perhaps 200 wounded, against a force 5 times larger, led by experienced commanders, equipped with the finest arms and armour England could provide. The outcome should have been a massacre. It was, just not the one the English expected. This was not luck. This was not divine intervention. This was planning. William Wallace chose the battlefield. He studied the terrain. He understood that heavy cavalry needed space to manoeuvre, that infantry needed room to deploy, that a narrow bridge turned an army into a column of helpless targets. He waited, with inhuman patience, until enough English crossed to be worth killing, but not enough to overwhelm his line. And then he struck with brutal, surgical precision. Andrew Moray provided discipline. Where Wallace was fire, Moray was steel. His northern levies held formation under pressure, refused to break when cavalry charged, maintained the integrity of the schiltron, even as men died around them. Together, they turned 1,800 farmers and outlaws into a killing machine. The English never had a chance. By midday, the English army is gone, fled south in chaos, abandoning Stirling Castle, abandoning central Scotland, abandoning any pretense of control. Garrisons across the lowlands hear the news and panic. Some surrender. Others barricade themselves and wait for relief that will not come. Scotland, for the first time in years, breathes free air. Wallace and Moray are named Guardians of the Realm, joint commanders of the Scottish resistance, acting in the name of the deposed King John Balliol. It is an impossible position. They have no royal blood, no noble titles of significance. They are upstarts, commoners elevated by violence and necessity. But they have done what no Scottish lord managed. They have won. The celebrations are short-lived. Victory does not end wars. It starts new ones. Chapter break. Andrew Moray never recovers. He was wounded during the battle. A blade thrust, a blow to the side, something that seemed minor in the chaos. But infection spreads. Within weeks, he is bedridden, feverish, dying slowly in a cold stone chamber while Scotland celebrates around him. He dies in November, 1297. Wallace is alone now. The weight of leadership, of an entire nation's hope, falls on his shoulders. He's not a king, not a general trained in the art of statecraft. He is a guerrilla fighter elevated to a role he never sought, commanding an army held together by fury and desperation. He does what he knows. He attacks. In the winter of 1297, Wallace leads Scottish forces across the border into northern England. Raids, burnings, towns put to the torch in retaliation for years of English occupation. It is brutal, merciless, and strategically questionable. The raids anger Edward, but do not weaken him. They give Wallace momentum, but no strategic advantage. And they buy time for King Edward to prepare his response. Edward returns from Flanders in 1298, and he is furious. The man who conquered Wales, who humiliated the French, who bent Scotland to his will, has been embarrassed by a commoner. He raises the largest army ever assembled for a Scottish campaign. 3,000 heavy cavalry, 15,000 infantry, Welsh longbowmen, siege engineers, supply trains stretching for miles. He marches north with one goal: annihilation. The two armies meet at Falkirk on the 22nd of July, 1298. Wallace tries the same tactics: schiltrons, defensive ground, discipline over numbers. But Edward has learned. He does not charge the schiltrons. He does not funnel his men into a trap. Instead, he positions his Welsh longbowmen at range and orders them to shoot. Arrows fall like black rain. The schiltrons, tight formations of men standing shoulder to shoulder, become death traps. Arrows punch through leather, through mail, through flesh. Men fall in rows. The formations waver. English cavalry, waiting patiently, charge the gaps. The Scottish line shatters. Thousands die. Wallace escapes, but his army is destroyed. His reputation as an invincible commander dies with them. He becomes a fugitive again, hunted, betrayed by Scottish nobles who see him as a liability, who want to negotiate with Edward, who fear rebellion more than occupation. In 1305, Wallace is captured near Glasgow. He is dragged to London in chains, tried for treason, though he was never an English subject, convicted, sentenced. On the 23rd of August, 1305, William Wallace is hanged, drawn, and quartered in Smithfield. His body is butchered. His head is placed on a spike on London Bridge. His limbs are sent to the corners of Scotland as warnings. Edward believes he has won. He has not, because the fire Wallace lit at Stirling Bridge does not die with him. Stirling Bridge should have been impossible. On paper, it was suicide. 1,800 Scots against an English army 5 times larger, better armed, better trained, led by experienced commanders. The outcome should have been foregone, but terrain is not neutral. Leadership is not luck, and courage, when combined with intelligence, can shatter empires. Wallace understood something most commanders forget. Battles are not won by the largest army. They are won by the army that controls the ground, dictates the terms, and forces the enemy to fight on their terms. The bridge was not an obstacle. It was a weapon. The marsh was not a hindrance. It was a cage. The high ground was not a defensive position. It was a launching point for a killing blow. This was not the Wallace of Braveheart, blue paint and wild charges and Hollywood heroics. This was a man who studied his enemy, exploited their arrogance, and turned their strength into their doom. He was not a barbarian, he was a strategist, and his victory resonated far beyond that bloody morning. Stirling Bridge proved that English military dominance was not inevitable. It shattered the myth of invincibility that had kept Scotland subjugated. It showed that commoners could stand against knights, that farmers with spears could destroy cavalry. That resistance was not futile. Wallace died, but the idea of Wallace survived. 17 years after Stirling Bridge, Robert the Bruce, a Scottish noble who had once fought for the English, led another army against another English king. At Bannockburn, in 1314, he used the same principles Wallace taught: control the terrain, force the enemy into a trap, strike when they are vulnerable. Bruce won. Scotland won. And Edward II fled the field in humiliation. The blueprint was Stirling Bridge. Wallace's execution was meant to terrify Scotland into submission. Instead, it created a martyr. Ballads spread his name. Stories magnified his deeds. He became larger than life, a symbol of defiance, of refusal to kneel, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Empires rise and fall. Armies fade into history. Kings are forgotten. But moments of courage, moments when the impossible becomes real, echo across centuries. At Stirling Bridge on the 11th of September, 1297, 1,800 Scots faced an empire and won. They did not have castles. They did not have noble bloodlines. They did not have the blessing of kings. What they had was a narrow bridge, a brilliant plan, and the refusal to accept defeat. And they ignited a fire that no executioner could ever extinguish.